June 9, 2013, a former agent of the CIA appears on camera and exposes one of the best-kept secrets of the United States government. Every time you send a photo to your partner, write something you don't want anyone to read or visit a site, thinking no one will ever know someone else is watching because the government is watching all of us. Edward Snowden revealed that they secretly forced companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and Yahoo to hand over everything their users were doing online. They also hacked phones, cameras, and microphones to see and hear not just criminals or terrorists, but ordinary citizens like you. In theory, it was for national security, but over time it was discovered that it also served another purpose: social control. And within that system, some employees were using it for entertainment. They would just type in the name of whoever they were interested in, ex's friends or celebrities, and gain access to their entire digital life. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because the spying doesn't stop with this government. Today, big corporations are watching you, tracking you, and building your digital twin, a copy of you that predicts what you're going to want, what you're going to do, and what you're going to think. The dystopian future is already here, even if only a few realize it. Today, you're going to see how the biggest surveillance system of the modern era works, why it's so dangerous, and what you can do to protect yourself and escape from it. The streets of Hong Kong are bustling with people perfect for staying unseen. In a public square, two journalists are waiting. Who for, they don't know. They only have one clue. He's carrying a Rubik's Cube. Suddenly, they spot him. They walk together towards a hotel. In the room, the first thing the man does is ask them for their cell phones. He doesn't want anything to leak. Glenn, one of the journalists, questions how it could leak. The man doesn't answer. He just puts the phones in the microwave to block the signal. He turns on the camera and begins the interview. The man introduces himself: Edward Snowden, an expert in computers and cybersecurity. Today, he works as a private contractor for the NSA, the National Security Agency of the United States. Before that, he was part of the CIA. He is here to reveal one of the best-kept secrets of the United States government. But to understand how he got to this point, we have to go back. When Snowden applies to the CIA, they subject him to tests, interviews, and even a lie detector. He passes everything and is accepted under the command of Corbin O'Brien. O'Brien explains his mission to stop terrorism, but not on the battlefield, but behind a computer monitoring, communications tracking threats, and protecting government information. He warns him that the war is no longer fought in Iraq or Afghanistan, but in the messages, calls, and emails of suspects. That is the new front. And if another September 11th happens, the responsibility will fall on them. To evaluate the new recruits, he gives them a test. Create a secret communication network, protect it, destroy it, and then restore it from scratch. The goal is to keep it secure and online for as long as possible. The average time to accomplish this is 5 hours. If they take more than 8, they fail. Snowden completes the test in 38 minutes. O'Brien doesn't believe it. He checks the result and finds nothing. Errors. The network is perfect. Sometime later in a coffee shop, Snowden meets up with Lindsay Mills, a photographer who he met on a dating site. They talk. They like each other, and they start dating. Back in training, O'Brien reminds him of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. Every person has the right to be secure in their home, in their belongings, and in their privacy. The government cannot spy or search anything without a valid warrant. Snowden smiles. He likes hearing that. He believes in his country, in its laws, and in its government. Until O'Brien adds something else. Those warrants can alert the suspect that they are being watched. So in certain cases, they're issued in secret courts. Snowden is taken aback. Secret courts. Who oversees them? How do you know they're following the rules? He doesn't say anything, but something starts to bother him. This is where our analysis begins. In order to understand the seriousness of the secret Snowden revealed, we must first understand something basic. How does the United States intelligence system work? The country has one of the largest espionage networks in the world, and all that work is concentrated, mainly in 3 agencies: the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA, each with a different function. The FBI protects the United States from threats that arise from within the country itself, like terrorism, corruption, organized crime, and extremist groups. For example, the FBI was the agency that managed to catch Al Capone, one of the most dangerous criminals of his time, who operated out of Chicago. Decades later, it was also key in the investigation of the Boston Marathon bombing. The Central Intelligence Agency is in charge of what happens outside of the United States, of obtaining model information on governments, armed groups, or foreign threats that could put the country's security at tremendous risk. For example, it was behind the coup d'etat in Iran in 1953, where it helped overthrow the prime minister who wanted to nationalize the oil. It also trained Cuban exiles to try to invade Cuba and take down Fidel Castro. And during the Cold War, it carried out secret operations to stop the expansion of the Soviet Union and communism. The NSA, the National Security Agency, is the most secretive and technologically advanced of all. In fact, when it was created in 1952, it was by a confidential order from President Harry Truman. Not even Congress knew of its existence, and for years, everything it did remained classified. Its original mission was to intercept communications from foreign governments, especially those of the Soviet Union and its allies. They listened in on calls and captured signals to uncover military or espionage plans. In other words, while the CIA sent human spies, the NSA spied from a distance using technology. Over time, its mission expanded to almost everything that happens in the digital world: emails, calls, and social media. And that's where the Snowden scandal would erupt. But before the NSA was the problem, the FBI. The FBI was. In the 1970s, it was revealed that the FBI had spied on Martin Luther King Jr. They placed hidden microphones in the hotels where he stayed, tapped his calls, and even documented his extramarital affairs to use that information against him. When all this came to light, the public was enraged. The government agencies were violating the Fourth Amendment, the one that protects right to privacy. Faced with pressure, Congress had to act, though it was more to quiet the critics than to make any real change. In 1978, FISA was born, a law that required that no domestic spying could be carried out without a judge's approval. But here's the catch. That review wouldn't happen in a regular court where cases are public and there are lawyers for both sides. These hearings would be held in secret with no defense and with judges appointed directly by the Supreme Court. Only the government could present its case, and the people under surveillance would never even know they had been spied on. So how much of a difference did FISA really make? The statistics show that about 99% of applications were approved, which means it ended up being more of a formality than any real oversight. Then came September 11th, 2001, the attacks on the Twin Towers and the Pentagon. From that day forward, the United States was willing to do whatever was necessary to prevent something like that from ever happening again. In the name of national security, it built the largest surveillance system in the world where no one inside or outside the country would ever have real privacy again. And that includes you. In a few moments, you're going to realize just how disturbing and invasive it can get. Back in the present, at the hotel room, journalist Ewan McCaskill from The Guardian arrives. Snowden's plan is to expose, with the help of journalists, everything he has discovered about how the United States government spies on millions of people. He knows he's risking accusations of treason charges, of espionage, and of putting the nation's security, national security. Best case scenario, he'll go to prison. Worst case, he'll end up in a secret CIA interrogation room. Still, he's made up his mind. If he doesn't do it, no one else will. Snowden shows WN the first tool, KeyScore, a search engine similar to Google, but instead of searching the internet, it searches people's digital activity. He first learned about it years ago while working for the CIA in Geneva. There, he befriended Gabriel Sol, an analyst who invited him to stay with him while he worked. One afternoon, Snowden watches as Gabriel opens the program and types the words, "Eliminate the president." In seconds, thousands of results appear. Emails, messages, search histories, and calls. Snowden asks him which people it's searching or how it decides which computers to check. Gary laughs. There's no filter. They check everything from everyone. Sometime later, Snowden is assigned to find a pressure point on Marwan al-Kermani, a Middle Eastern banker. Gary opens the CIA database and types in his name. In seconds, everything appears: financial, medical, digital, and social information. The system classifies his relationships into two levels. First degree, contacts, family, his partner and close friends, and second degree, his boss, colleagues, and acquaintances. Gary suggests starting with those closest to him. He opens the profile of Marwan's sister-in-law. Suddenly, her laptop camera activates. There she is in her room, undressing. Snowden freezes. They don't just have people's data. They have access to their lives in real time. Then he moves on to the profile of Marwan's daughter, a 15-year-old girl. In seconds, he gains access to her entire Facebook, not just what she posts, but also her private messages with friends and with her boyfriend. Snowden can't believe it. They don't need a warrant, not even from those secret courts. Gabriel shrugs his shoulders. In X-Keyscore, you don't need warrants. Besides those secret, courts are just a formality. They just put a stamp on it and approve anything. That night, Snowden is with Lindsay while they're being intimate. He notices his computer's camera. He knows they could be watching, and he has a panic attack. What the movie shows is pretty close to reality. After September 11th, the United States launched a massive digital espionage campaign. It was no longer about monitoring suspects, but about collecting everything from everyone. And they did it in three main ways. The first was by forcing the big tech companies to hand over their users' data. And which companies? Were they Facebook, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Yahoo, among others? They would hand over everything from emails and private messages to photos, documents, and everything, a person stored in the cloud. This meant that if someone inside the system wanted to know more about you, all they had to do was type in your name to get total access to your privacy, the searches you made on the internet, the messages you sent to your friends, and the photos you shared with your partner. And that's exactly what many employees started to do. They would spy on their partners, ex-girlfriends, or celebrities just out of curiosity. In fact, it was such a common practice that within the NSA, it even had a name for it. Love-int or love intelligence. The second way was known as upstream. In this case, the NSA wasn't even asking the companies for the data. They were intercepting it directly as it traveled across the internet. Imagine, you send an email through Gmail. Before it even reaches Google's servers, that email passes through cables, routers, and data centers distributed all over the world. The NSA had direct access to several of those connection points, thanks to secret agreements with telecommunications companies like AT&T and Verizon. That way they could copy all the traffic that passed through there. The third method was even more invasive. The NSA would hack devices directly, planting a spy program, malware on your phone or your computer, and with that, they could record every key you typed and get your passwords, messages, and emails. They could copy files, whether they were photos or documents, and send them to their servers. And the most disturbing part, they could turn on the microphone or camera to listen and watch everything you did. All of this was done in the name of national security, but really, how safe is that for you if a government has access to all of your digital information? The consequences can be much more serious than you can imagine. And we're not talking about a theory, it's happening right now. In a few minutes, you're going to see how the United States government is currently using your own data to manipulate what you think and to control who enters its country and who doesn't. Snowden decides to leave. He's offered another job, this time as a contractor for the NSA, the National Security Agency. Despite his doubts, he accepts as he believes that with Obama in the presidency, things might change. But he's wrong. At first, Snowden works on a system to make backup copies of the government's information. The idea is to save duplicates of all the state's data, emails, reports, databases, records, and so on, so that if an attack or a failure occurs, nothing is lost. They call that project Epic Shelter. Remember that name because later on, it will be important. Afterwards, he's transferred to an area that, although not stated, openly is dedicated to international espionage. There, he discovers the system's true scope. The targets are not just terrorists, but also allied countries like Japan, Mexico, Germany, Brazil, and Belgium. He sees how calls are intercepted, drones are controlled, and networks are infiltrated, electrical grids, hospitals, and energy systems. If any of those countries were to stop being an ally, it would only take a few clicks to leave them without electricity, without communication, and without defense. They also monitor political leaders like Enrique Peña Nieto in Mexico or Angela Merkel in Germany, in addition to major business leaders. They tap calls, emails, and documents about trade agreements, negotiations, and scandals, all with the goal of giving the country an advantage in international negotiations or oversight governments that don't cooperate. Snowden begins to understand that the justification of preventing terrorism is just a facade. The real objective is not security, it's economic and social control, keeping the United States at the top. But out of all this, what does it have to do with you? Should you be worried? Absolutely, yes. With such extreme surveillance, the first thing that's lost is freedom of expression. When you know someone is watching everything you post, you start to choose your words carefully to avoid certain topics, especially political ones, because any comment can be used against you. And this is something that is already happening. Since 2019, the Donald Trump administration changed the rules for those applying for a U.S. visa. Now, anyone who wants to enter the country must provide the usernames for all their social media accounts: Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, and YouTube. The government says this is to detect potential threats to national security. For example, if someone sympathizes with terrorist groups or has made violent posts, But in practice, this also gives the government direct access to your opinions, your contacts, and your political ideas. And if you've ever criticized the government-supported radical causes or followed anti-patriotic accounts, they can deny you a visa without explanation. Recently, this became even more extreme. After the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, a Trump ally, the authorities warned they would revoke visas or deport foreigners who published messages celebrating his death. At that point, surveillance stops protecting and starts silencing. And when people are afraid to speak, to share their opinions, or to criticize, democracy fades away little by little because it only works when people can express what they think without fear of being punished. The second thing that is lost with such extreme surveillance is freedom of thought. When the government has access to all your digital information, what you search for, what you watch, what you like, and what you share, it can know exactly how you think, what you fear, and what drives you. And that gives it the power to shape your opinion without you even realizing it. That was exactly what happened with Cambridge Analytica, a political consulting firm that worked on the Donald Trump's campaign. The company obtained the data of over 80 million Facebook users, their likes, photos, posts, friendships, topics of interest, age, ideology, and location. With all that information, they built psychological profiles for each person, what they were afraid of, what moved them, and what kind of messages could convince them. From there, they used those profiles to send personalized political messages to millions of voters. For example, if the system detected you were afraid of immigration, it would show you videos about violence and borders. If you were a religious person, you'd see messages about defending Christian values, and if you were young and liberal, they'd show you posts that made you feel that no candidate was worth it so that you wouldn't vote. Each person saw a different version of the world, designed specifically to influence their vote. And in the end, Donald Trump won. Maybe it wasn't all due to that manipulated data, but it definitely influenced the outcome. And in fact, I have a video explaining this in depth. So if you want to see it, it's on my documentary channel. I'll leave a link down below. Although the government argues that spying can be used to prevent threats or terrorist attacks, and in part they're right, we have to ask what the framework is, what the limit is, or to what extent it's worth it. Because allowing a government to have total access to its citizens' information and use this information or this mechanism incorrectly is a risk for everyone. What's most disturbing is that today it's no longer just the government that has access to this data. Now there are hundreds of companies that collect it. They buy them and use them to influence what you see, feel, desire, buy, do, believe, and decide. And the worst part is they don't have to spy on us. We hand it all over to them ourselves every day. Later on, we'll see how they get that data and what you can do to protect yourself. Snowden seeks out O'Brien to understand what to do with everything he has discovered. He confronts him saying, no one told him they were watching the entire world. O'Brien replies that it's been more than 60 years since the Second World War, and there hasn't been a third. Why? Because we use our power to keep the peace. Snowden doesn't agree. He says that people don't know they're being spied on. O'Brien answers that that's the price of living safely. He then offers him a position at the NSA in Oahu, Hawaii. The job, in theory, is to prevent cyber attacks from China. Snowden accepts. He thinks that at last he'll be able to use his talent to defend his country. Upon arriving at the facility, known as the tunnel, he goes through a strict security check. Inside, he begins to work with surveillance systems that are used to locate terrorists and eliminate them. For the first time, he feels his work has meaning until he understands how they do it. The targets are tracked by their cell phone signals, which means that if the phone isn't with the terrorist but with his son, or if it's in a building full of civilians, the system launches the attack anyway. Snowden is stunned. He asks, "What's the name of the program that controls all this?" Trevor, his boss, replies, "Epic Shelter." The very same system that Snowden had created to make backup copies had been secretly transformed into a tool to store surveillance data and monitor people in real time. He grew more and more disgusted. Snowden has an idea. He says there are too many intelligence programs and that it's almost impossible to keep track of them. He suggests creating a platform that centralizes all the information in one place. He would like to call it Heartbeat. Trevor approves the project and Snowden begins to develop it. During testing, he makes a discovery that leaves him cold. He immediately calls his colleagues over to show them. On the screen, a world map appears with all the data the NSA collects: emails, social media calls, messages. But what shocks him most isn't the quantity, but the origin. In the United States, twice as many communications are recorded as in any other country. This means that the NSA, rather than monitoring external threats, is dedicated to spying on its own citizens. The team falls silent. Shortly after, Snowden gets a call from O'Brien in Washington. He tells him he's heard the comments he's been making among his colleagues. As a threat, he adds, "By the way, Lindy isn't cheating on you. That photographer friend you're so worried about isn't a problem." At that moment, Snowden realizes they're watching him. And although at first glance his case might seem extreme, it really isn't. We are also being watched. They listen to us, they watch us, and they anticipate what we're thinking. It's not government agents doing it, but companies. Surely this has happened to you. You pause for a few seconds to look at a photo of some sneakers, and instantly it seems like every page you visit wants to sell you a similar pair. You talk with a friend about a trip, and when you open your phone, you get ads for flights and hotels, and sometimes it's worse. You don't search for it. You don't say it, you just think it. And yet the recommendations appear as if someone were reading your mind. This is not a coincidence. Algorithms collect so much information about you that they no longer need you to search for anything. They can anticipate your interests, your habits, and even your moods. So how do they do it? In several ways. The first starts with something as simple as owning a phone or a computer. You don't have to do anything, not talk, not write, not even browse. Just having them on means you're already sending information. Your location, Wi-Fi network, battery level, or motion sensors say more about you than you might think. For example, if your phone always connects to the same Wi-Fi at night, they know where you live. If it moves to the same area every morning, they know where you work or study. And if you charge it at the same time every day, they can figure out when you get home and what time you're free. With just that data, they can already outline part of your profile, your economic status, your habits, your life, style, and even your potential concerns. But that's just the surface. Then comes what you actually do on your phone. The apps and web pages you use are full of tiny pieces of code called trackers or cookies that record everything you do. They know which page you opened, how long you looked at it, how far you scrolled, and at what point you lost interest. They even measure how many seconds you look at a photo, if you zoom in, if you replay a video, or if you pause on an ad. The most unsettling part is that this data are all in one app. The platforms cross-reference them, connecting what you do in one place with what you do in another. And by comparing all that information, they can build a pretty accurate psychological profile. If you follow certain topics or pages, the system starts to detect your beliefs, your stances, and your fears. If you make quick purchases or get into arguments, it's interpreted as impulsiveness. If you check your phone all the time or switch screens nonstop, it's logged as anxiety or stress. And if you spend hours chatting or on social media without really interacting, you're labeled as lonely or emotionally empty, as if that weren't enough now. Technologies are being added that are designed to figure you out completely. For example, Google. If you accept options like personalized ads or improving voice recognition, you give the system permission to use the microphone and analyze audio snippets. It's not that someone is listening to your conversations, but the system can detect words, tones, and ambient sounds, which means your phone is collecting information about what you talk about and experience all day. Spotify, like many other platforms, gathers data every time you listen to music. It logs what songs you play at, what time, how long you listen, if you repeat them, and so on. But in 2018, the company took it a step further. It filed a patent that would allow it to analyze your voice, its tone, speed, and even the sounds of where you are to detect your emotional state and offer you music that fits it. For example, if your voice sounds tired or sad, the system could recommend slow or melancholic songs. Then it filed another, advanced a method for identifying your contextual state, meaning whether you're alone with someone, walking, working, or even depressed. With all that information, Spotify can understand your mood with a high degree of accuracy, keep feeding it, and get you to keep listening for longer. Then there's Amazon, which also patented a technology where when you speak to Alexa, its virtual assistant, it can detect if you have a cold or tired, stressed, or sad just by the sound of your voice. But it doesn't stop there. If Alexa notices that your voice sounds congested, it will recommend medications or products, not because it wants to help you, but because it detects the exact moment when you are most likely to buy something. And if it senses you sound down, Amazon shows you more ads because it knows you're in a vulnerable state, and that often spending some money gives you a false sense of relief. Thus, a simple change in your tone of voice can be used to gauge your mood, take advantage of you when you're weak, and push you to consume more. all that information they collect about you, your location, your routines, your searches, your tastes, your voice, and even your mood is gathered, analyzed, and ultimately gives shape to a digital version of you, what they now call a customer digital twin. It's a virtual model that feeds on all your data and over time can not only describe what you've done in the past, but also anticipate your decisions before you even make them yourself. And what does that imply? Why is it dangerous? We'll see in a moment. Snowden rushes home and takes Lindy into the garden away from any electronic devices. He explains that they have been monitoring both of them and that it's possible the house might have hidden mics. He asks you to act normally, but if you notice anything strange, to contact him through a coded email that he will give you. That same night, Snowden sends a message to the journalists, gives them a date, a place, and a signal to recognize him by. The Rubik's Cube. The next day he arrives at work, determined. He knows it will be the last time he ever enters that place. He inserts a memory card into his computer. He downloads all of Heartbeat's content, every program, every record, and every NSA surveillance file. When he's finished, he removes the card and hides it. Inside his Rubik's Cube, he grabs his things and heads for the exit. There's only one obstacle left, the security checkpoint. He has to go through a body scanner and place his belongings in a tray to be checked by X-ray. He's going to get caught. Here, we're going to stop. We've already seen all the information that companies and governments can collect about you, but why is that dangerous? Because there are companies that literally pay for your data. Because with that psychological profile, they can predict, manipulate, and even control you, especially in four ways. First, they manipulate how much you buy. They know exactly what you like. And when you're most vulnerable, they show you ads at the exact moment you're tired, sad, or bored. That's how they get you to buy things you never even thought of buying. You no longer decide because you want to, but because they've activated the impulse and you end up spending more than you wanted. Second, they shape what you think. Algorithms decide what you see and what you don't. They show you the topics they want you to care about and hide the ones they don't. Furthermore, the images you see over and over again end up shaping what you consider normal, desirable, or correct. Without you realizing it, they change your way of thinking and seeing reality. Third, they control your behaviors by knowing perfectly how your attention works. They can also control it and keep you hooked on everything from social media and video games to much more dangerous things like gambling. With that, they reprogram your reward system, training your brain to need constant stimuli. Little by little, you get used to seeking pleasure only there in what they put in front of you. And what used to make you happy, a conversation, a walk, or a real achievement, starts to seem boring. Fourth, they influence who you vote for. With all the information they have on you, companies and governments can know what scares you, what angers you, and what excites you. Then they can use that to show you political messages tailored just for you. As mentioned before, if they know you're worried about crime, they'll flood you with videos about robberies. If they detect that corruption bothers you, they'll show you ads where a candidate promises to end it. Slowly, they push you to support a cause, a party, or a person without you noticing that you're being manipulated. Given all this, your digital information matters, and more than that, it has power. Putting it in the wrong hands means giving up part of your freedom. And that's now. Imagine what it will be like in a few years or decades. That's why it's crucial to start protecting yourselves today. In a few moments, I'm going to share some simple measures you can take to protect yourself. Snowden thinks fast. Before reaching the detector, he hands the Rubik's Cube to one of the guards. "Want to give it a try?" he says. The guard smiles and starts to turning it over in his hands, trying to solve it. Meanwhile, Snowden puts his body and his backpack through the scanner. When he's done, the guard hands him back the cube. Snowden walks out of the tunnel and smiles. He flies back to Hong Kong, meets with the journalists, and gives them all the information. Finally, on the morning of June 5th, 2013, the first leak is published. The Guardian newspaper reveals that the NSA is obtaining the daily phone records of millions of customers of Verizon, one of the largest companies in the United States. The government isn't listening to the conversations, but it knows who you talk to, when, and from where. The order comes from a secret intelligence court called the FISA court, and it all happens without the public's knowledge. The next day, the second blow hits. The Guardian and the Washington Post reveal the PRISM program, which allows the NSA to have direct access to the servers of companies like Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, and Yahoo. With PRISM, they can get emails, photos, messages, histories, and calls from millions of users, including people who have no connection to crime or terrorism. Every day, something new comes out. The NSA spies on presidents and diplomats. It listens to Angela Merkel in Germany, Dilma Rousseff in Brazil, Nicolas Sarkozy in France, intercepts emails in Mexico, monitors communications in Spain and Japan, and even surveils international institutions like the UN and the European Union. The news goes global. All the case media outlets are talking about it. Allied governments and ordinary citizens are demanding explanations. The White House tries to justify itself, claiming that everything is done for national security, but for the people. This is the biggest violation of privacy in modern history. Meanwhile, Snowden and the team of journalists debate whether to reveal his identity. In the middle of the discussion, he gets a notification. 2 NCA agents have gone to his house looking for him. So he makes a decision. Here we'll take another pause. Let's just keep the suspense. Going to show you some simple ways to protect your information, your privacy, and your freedom. Imagine that your information is like a house, and now you have all the doors open. Anyone can enter, observe you, install microphones, or even move your things. So the first thing you have to do to protect yourself is close the door. That is, put a stop to the cookies and trackers. You can do this in 3 very simple ways. First, no matter how lazy you feel, always reject cookies. Never give them permission to a site without checking. Yes, websites make the Accept All button easier to click, but rejecting them takes less than 10 seconds. Second, go into the settings of your browser, be it Safari, Chrome, or the one you use, and block third-party cookies. But sometimes that is not enough. For a more complete block, you can install free extensions like Privacy Badger or uBlock Origin. These detect and block invisible trackers that activate even without your permission. And third, if you're able, use another browser. Chrome and Safari live off your data. They're designed to track you. So switch to browsers designed to protect your privacy like Firefox, DuckDuckGo, LibreWolf, or Brave. All right, you've closed the door, but that's not enough, because even if no one new gets in, there might already be things inside watching you. So the next step is to do a cleanup on your phone or computer. Go to Settings, then Privacy, and check which apps have access to your camera, microphone location, or contacts. Turn off everything that doesn't need that permission to work. There's no reason for a flashlight app, for example, to have access to your location. And if you're on your phone, disable cross-app tracking. This prevents one app from sharing your data with another. For example, a game or a weather app telling Facebook or TikTok what you do on your phone. On iPhone, go to Privacy and then Tracking. On Android, go to Privacy and then disable cross-app tracking. Also, clear your cookies every week. That way you'll remove traces of your searches, your purchases, and your habits, and you'll prevent sites from continuing to collect information about you. Now then, if you want to make your house even more secure, hire a digital security guard, a VPN or virtual private network. A VPN creates a secure connection that hides what you do on the internet. No one on the outside can see what pages you visit, what you search for, or where you're connecting from. Some good options are Ghost VPN or NordVPN. Be careful with free VPNs, because many do the exact opposite of what they promise and sell your data to third parties. You've already locked the door. You've done a cleanup, and you've hired a guard, but if you give a copy of the keys to a stranger, all of that becomes useless. That's exactly what happens when you enter sites using sign in with Google or with Facebook. Every time you click on that button, you give that company permission to track you outside of its own platform. Google and Facebook don't just know what you do inside their networks, but also everything that you do on the pages or apps where you use their login. In other words, if you log into an online store with your Google account, Google knows what you saw, what you bought, and when. If you use Facebook to log into an app for dating or travel, Facebook receives information about your interests, your likes, and your routines. And though they say they only do it to improve your experience, what they also often do is cross-reference all that data to profile you better. And finally, one of the best ways to protect your freedom is to detach from your devices, to be able to leave home without your phone, to get bored without feeling anxious to open an app, to live something without the need to share it, to have a hobby that doesn't depend on a screen, to sit down and think for a while without music, without notifications, and without interruptions. In short, to be okay again without a screen, to once again have a life beyond technology. On Sunday, June 9th, 2013, Snowden connects to a broadcast. He reveals he's the one behind the leaks. He acknowledges that many will see him as a traitor, but he firmly believes that people have the right to know that they're being watched and recorded, that each person should be able to decide if that's what they want. And if it's not, then they must act, because that surveillance will only continue to grow to the point where there's no way to stop it. From that moment on, Snowden becomes the most wanted man in the world. He knows that if he stays in Hong Kong, he'll be extradited to the United States, so tries to escape. He takes a flight to Moscow with the idea of continuing on to Cuba and then Ecuador, where he plans to ask for political asylum. But during the flight, the United States government revokes his passport. Upon landing in Moscow, he is trapped at the airport. For 39 days, he sleeps on the floor and eats what volunteers bring him. Meanwhile, support for him grows all over the world. Thousands of people defend him and various organizations demand his protection. Finally, Russia grants him temporary political asylum. Snowden stays in the country where he still lives, to this day with Lindsay. From his exile, he participates in a video conference. The moderator asks him if he ever plans on returning to the United States. Snowden replies that he would do so without hesitation if he could have a fair and transparent trial, but he knows that's not going to happen, that they would punish him to send a message. This is what happens to those who dare to reveal the truth. Then they ask him, after everything, do you think what you did was worth it? Then the image in the film changes. It's no longer the actor, but the real Edward Snowden in front of the camera saying, when I left Hawaii, I lost everything. I had a stable life, family and a future. I lost that life, but I gained a new one and I feel very fortunate. The greatest freedom that I've gained is not having to worry about what happens tomorrow because I'm at peace with what I did today. Snowden uncovered the largest system of espionage in the modern history of the United States, and thanks to that, there were some changes. The most important was the USA Freedom Act passed in 2015, a law that prohibits the NSA from continuing to collecting the phone records of all citizens. Now, the data stays in the hands of the phone companies like Verizon or AT&T, and the NSA can only access it in specific cases with the authorization of a judge. And where does that judge come from? From FISA, the same secret court that allowed the abuses in the first place. So, in practice, not much has changed. The only thing that's really new is that now the FISA has to include something like a counterbalance, a group of lawyers who defend privacy and civil liberties. They can intervene when the government requests access to surveillance data. Also, the court is required to publish or at least declassify some of its most important decisions. These are steps forward, of course, but in the end, the system is still almost the same, opaque, shielded, and very difficult to oversee. Where there were more changes was in the tech world. The big companies pressured by public opinion strengthened the encryption of their services. WhatsApp, Apple, and Google, for example, implemented stronger security systems so that not even the government can easily access your messages or files. Still, there's a long way to go. Technology is advancing faster and faster, and our laws and our awareness